Cool, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to start with a question for you all. Is anybody hungry? Yeah. All right, excellent. So Chef Dede and her team are going to prepare some great food for us after this, but you'll have to just bear with me for a second. We're going to get to enjoy these breakfast sandwiches, pretty simple breakfast sandwich, cheese, sausage, eggs, but first we've just got to do something before y'all get to eat this. And hold on, just bear with me. Okay, we're getting ready. So now you might be wondering why I just dumped an entire gallon of water down the drain, why I would go and waste all that water, especially during Earth Week here on Environment Day at Google, no less. Well, to produce just the single egg in this breakfast sandwich that we're going to eat, we have to dump out not 1, but 53 gallons of water. That's how much water it takes to produce just a single egg, 53 gallons. To produce sausage, that's another 500 gallons of water, and cheese, that's another 50 gallons of water. That's what it takes to produce protein from animals. See, in the 15 years that I've been researching food systems and advocating for a better one, I've come to realize that the number one most wasteful aspect of our food system today comes from the fact that we use animals as a middleman. So here's what I mean. First, we grow crops. We don't feed those crops to humans. First, we feed them to animals to fatten them up. We raise the animals, we transport them to slaughter, and the rest is history. So yeah, animals are just kind of the middleman between the crops we produce to feed them and the protein they produce to feed us. The problem is it's super inefficient. Even in the best cases, a farm animal converts only like 11% of what's called feed energy into human food. That means that calorically speaking, 89% of what we put into an animal is wasted. And nearly all these animals in our food supply chain are chickens. We're so knee-deep in chickens today that every 60 seconds, every single day, 130,000 of these animals are slaughtered. If you can imagine that, 130,000 animals every minute of every day, 24/7, 365. It's a lot of animals, and it's taking a toll. Because it's so inefficient to funnel crops through animals to get to protein, we lose loads of resources in the process, like all that water. The meat, dairy, and egg industries, all told, are so wasteful, they're so inefficient, that they now cause more greenhouse gas emissions than every car, truck, plane, ship, and train in the world combined. But the problems aren't just global, they're local too. I met this woman recently named Lisa, who lives on the eastern shore of Maryland on land that's been part of her family for like 4 generations. Totally normal neighborhood in most ways. You know, picture any suburban neighborhood, split level homes, toys in the front yard, basketball hoop in the driveway. But Lisa and her husband Joe, they're being pushed off their land. They're probably gonna have to sell their house soon. They're not being pushed out by crime or drugs or high-rise condos. They're being pushed out by chickens. See, having moved into their neighborhood are these massive chicken warehouses containing 10,000 birds, 20,000 birds, right in their backyard. I visited them last year, and I was really moved to see how just kind of peppered throughout their neighborhood are these massive warehouses now. You know, I saw the hordes of flies in the air. I smelled the stench. I saw buzzards flying overhead constantly, ready to pick off dead chickens littering the side of the road, all up and down their neighborhood. I had to see all this on one day, but Lisa and Joe and their neighbors, they have to live with it every single day right in their backyard. So we have to ask ourselves, does this still make sense? We've used animals as that middleman to get to protein for thousands of years, but do we still have to? In 2018, if breakfast sandwiches didn't exist and we wanted to build one from the ground up, using what we have available today, we wouldn't look toward chickens to produce the eggs, and we wouldn't look toward pigs to produce the sausage. In the same way that if the idea of watching movies at home was somehow brand new to us in 2018, the thing we wouldn't do is go out and build physical video rental stores to have to drive to on a Friday night. We use science and technology to cut out middlemen all the time, and the same is happening with food. And rather than growing all these crops and funneling them through animals, raising the animals, slaughtering them to get to protein, we can just use the protein that's already found in plants. And the food industry is doing this. They're making chicken without chickens. They're making plant-based burgers that have more protein than beef in them. They're making pork without pigs, and even cheese from nuts instead of cows. These products are way more efficient to produce. They require less water and less land and other inputs, and they're also better for us. Plant-based proteins tend to have less fat, less saturated fat. They have zero cholesterol, since cholesterol only comes from animal proteins. But what if we want real meat? I'm not talking about meat made from plants, but actual flesh, actual tissue, real muscle without animals. Impossible, right? Well, in 1931, Winston Churchill was asked to predict what the world would look like in a half a century, so by the 80s. And he predicted that we shall escape the absurdity of growing a whole chicken in order to eat the breast or the wing by growing those parts separately under a suitable medium. What didn't happen by the 80s, which is what Churchill predicted, but it's happening now. It's called clean meat, and like clean energy, it's way more resource efficient to produce. We can now take a biopsy the size of a poppy seed from just a single chicken feather, just the feather, and from that grow enough nuggets to feed an army or a village. So these innovations are shifting our relationship with food at the cellular level. And because what we eat is really an extension of what it is to be human, I believe that fundamentally changing our relationship with food in this way can serve to elevate our own humanity. I think it can lead to a kinder, more compassionate world for everybody. We humans are an amazing species. We're capable of really wonderful things. We've got a spark of imagination and creativity that's unparalleled in the rest of the animal kingdom. We're the only species on the planet that can see the stars, dream about what might be up there, and then actually go and find out. There's so much about us as a species that really is unique to us. But at the same time, we also share so much in common with the rest of the animal kingdom. Joy, play, communication. Do you all know that chickens use complex vocalizations to communicate with one another, just like we do? They have different calls to alert one another when a predator is approaching by land versus by air. Fish can learn and use tools. Pigs rank higher on intelligence tests than 3-year-old humans do. And of course, we all want to avoid pain. We all want to avoid suffering. Every animal wants to avoid fear. If through our diets we can learn to really value these similarities that we share with other species rather than just focusing on our differences, I think it would bring tremendous value to how we treat one another. So a fish was born with gills instead of lungs, so a chicken was born with wings instead of arms. If we can extend our circle of compassion to those beings even most unlike ourselves, how might we extend it to our fellow humans, to those born black instead of white, or gay instead of straight, to those born in another country than we were? Can you picture a world where we take so seriously this idea of valuing our similarities rather than just always focusing on our differences, that it extends even to the food we choose to eat? What about a world where we're happier, where we're plagued less by disease, a world where we're healthier, a world with a more stable climate where we do more with less? My road to picturing this world came about many years ago. When I was about 12, my sister came home from school a vegetarian. This was in the early 90s, if you couldn't guess by the clothes. And I'd never even heard the word vegetarian before, let alone met one. So what I do, like any good little brother, I made fun of her. You can imagine with that hair, I was the one making fun of her. I'd put a piece of steak on the end of my fork and put it in her face and make a mooing sound. My mom, fortunately, was much more accommodating than I was. If she had a pot of beef chili for the two of us on the stove, she'd have a pot of bean chili next to it for my sister. If she was grilling hamburgers in the backyard, she'd have a veggie burger out there as well. And I liked food. I wasn't opposed to trying new food, so I started to try some of these weird new foods. And I liked them. I was no vegetarian, though. If I had a black bean burger, I would put bacon on it. If I had a bean burrito one day for lunch, I'd make sure to have chicken for dinner, just to balance it out. Eventually, I did learn more and more and more about the reasons for my sister's new diet, and I also moved in that direction. So if you haven't guessed by now that you already have, our breakfast sandwich that we're going to enjoy isn't made from cheese and sausage and eggs. The cheese is made from almonds. The sausage is made from pea protein. The eggs are made from chickpea flour. The whole thing is entirely plant-based, without animals, and it's delicious. So, that world that where we're kinder, where we're more compassionate, the world where our meals are extensions of our morals, that's a better world for all of us. And, I know that all of us have it within us to serve as ambassadors for that world. Every time we sit down to eat, we can be a good example for our friends and neighbors at school, at church, at work, a good example for our little brothers and little sisters. And millions of people are doing it all over the country. People are trying Meatless Monday. They're eating smaller portions of meat. They're moving meat just from the center of the plate to the side of the plate. They're doing 1 or 2 veggie meals a day. Saving the world really can be as simple as that. And it begins with every bite. So thank you so much. And I am happy to field any questions. I know Marty's got a couple that we're going to kick things off with.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Excuse me, and thank you so much. It's kind of sobering to see some of those statistics. It really, truly is. Would you mind taking us through a little bit how you got started into the culinary arts and what kind of led you to this journey to decide to publish a book on the subject that you're so passionate about?
Yeah, I always loved cooking. I always loved being in the kitchen and felt comfortable there. When I was really little, I think one of my first projects in the kitchen was I would take all the spices out of our spice cabinet and organize them to combine all the little half jars of cinnamon and little half containers of pepper. When I was probably about 8, I started cooking really simple meals. I would make scrambled eggs in the microwave, which I don't recommend. It's about as good as it sounds like it's going to be.
Even with one of those cool little contraptions off of As You Can See on
just
TV?
In a mug. Yeah, not very good. But I just always loved cooking, and then especially when I became vegetarian and then when I became vegan, I realized that there was this whole culinary world out there that I had no idea about. I'd never tried Thai food. I'd never tried Indian food. I didn't even know that these things existed. Ethiopian food, tofu, tempeh, just all kinds of new tastes and textures and flavors that I'd never even heard about before. And that started me on my culinary path, was just realizing that there was a whole world of textures and flavors out there for the taking.
Fantastic. And you mentioned you're being a vegan, and from a chef's perspective, a lot of times when we hear vegan for folks that are non-vegans, it's veganism being the only answer to dietary problems and issues that we may face. Your approach is less about being a vegan specifically, more about a complete plant-based approach. Can you speak a little bit about why you chose that route versus the typical approach that this veganism is the only way to go?
Yeah, I think that there's literally a seat at the table for everybody when it comes to plant-forward eating, when it comes to using our diets as a tool for good in the world. Whether you're vegan, whether you're vegetarian, doing Meatless Mondays, whether you've only ever eaten one plant-based meal in your entire life, I just think that there's a place for everybody on the spectrum. And a lot of people now are doing Meatless Mondays. They're just eating smaller portions of meat, like I mentioned, or just literally moving meat from the center of the plate always to being more of a luxury item or on the side of the plate. And I think that's the way change happens. It takes everybody, whether regardless of what diet we might adhere to or try to adhere to. It's like all hands and forks on deck.
Right, absolutely. Do you find that approach has yielded a better reception from folks that maybe are not vegetarian or not vegan at all versus the traditional approach that's been out there in years past?
Yeah, there was a study that came out recently from a company called Mintel, a research group, and they found that there are about 22 million Americans who consider ourselves vegetarian, but 113 million who say they regularly eat meat alternatives, so veggie burgers and other products like that. So there are way more people who are eating vegetarian food than actually are vegetarian. So without a doubt, there's that's what most people are doing nowadays.
I think as we're starting to learn some of the effects that Matthew pointed out in his presentation of the raising of livestock on our environment, and it's still a fairly new thing that I think we're starting to wrap our heads around a little bit, and the news is getting out there. But I think my question to you is, given that you've been passionate about this for such a long time, how did you get into that piece of this and connect a vegan or a plant-forward lifestyle to the environment at such an early stage?
Yeah, I've always been passionate, I guess, about environmental issues. I'm a child of the 80s where, when you couldn't turn on the TV without hearing about global warming. Does everybody remember that? When, it was just everywhere. Now we call it climate change, of course. Back in the 80s, everybody was talking about global warming. And, so I just started learning about it from a young age. The thing that really made me move forward with my diet, I think, was I mentioned how my sister came home from school vegetarian, and I made fun of her. I didn't really get it, but we'd always had animals at home. We always had pets. We had cats, we had dogs, and I loved them. I just always, like most people, always kind of just shared a bond with animals. And I guess a few years after my sister had proclaimed herself vegetarian, I stumbled upon a video of what happens to animals in the livestock sector, the way that they're, without getting too graphic, the way that they're confined in cages and crates, barely larger than their own bodies, the way they're inhumanely, treated and slaughtered. And it just hit me that, my dog Kelsey at home, a German Shepherd, my cat Teaser, a little black cat, if I wouldn't want those things done to those animals, I shouldn't be paying somebody to do those things to other animals. And all of a sudden I understood why my sister had become vegetarian, and that was really the thing that pushed me over the edge. After I changed my diet, that's when I started learning more about the impact that my old diet had on the environment, about water usage and land usage and climate change and that connection to what we eat. But for me, it was just wanting to be kinder to animals.
And in terms of some of your favorite ingredients, what are some things that you cannot live without, whether it's at your home or things in the book that you think are a key thing for someone to have in their pantry as they start this journey?
Nuts. Definitely nuts, unless you have a nut allergy, sorry. I don't, so I use a lot of them. Nuts are a really amazing food. We can do so much with them. And, we can soak cashews, blend them up with just a little bit of water and salt, and make a cheesy sauce. Or, if you've ever had almond milk, that's basically what almond milk is, soaked almonds that have been, ground up and then strained. It's essentially almond milk. There are just so many creamy, cheesy, milky sauces and other kinds of products that we can make using nuts. There's a whole wide world out there of nut-based foods. Other great ingredients, I love a product called Nutritional Yeast. It's just, I'd never heard of it before I became vegan. And I'm so glad that I know about it now, because it's incredible. Whether you're vegan or not, sprinkle it on popcorn and your life will be changed. It's kind of like got a Parmesan cheese type flavor. It's kind of sharp and tangy. Really wonderful product.
My wife and I literally put it on pretty much everything. Whole Foods sells it. Grocery, I think Safeway now sells it. It's pretty nice.
And back in the, I don't even know if you could buy it in the 80s, but certainly like in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was like a vegan staple. Yeah. Now, more and more people are catching on to it and just think, wow, this is a great food.
And on that note, with the rise of kind of processed plant proteins, I will say, I know you alluded to a few of them in your presentation. I think the Impossible Foods burger up there. How do those fit into your plan, and how do those fit into your vision as to how to round out a plant-forward diet?
Yeah, I eat processed foods. I eat those types of convenience foods. There are all kinds of plant-based, plant-forward, meat-like but meat-free products of veggie chickens and the Impossible Burgers and Beyond Burgers that, now they say even bleed like meat does, but all from plant-based ingredients. I love that stuff. I eat it. I would say mostly my diet just personally consists more of like whole plant-based foods items. I like eating that stuff on the go if I'm traveling. There are a couple of restaurants in my neighborhood that serve that type of stuff. I like to go there if I just want like a juicy burger. But by and large, I just focus on whole plant-based foods, whole grains, legumes, nuts, beans, tofu, tempeh, products like that.
Do you have a favorite recipe in the book? One that really speaks to you?
I can't be biased against my own recipes.
It's like choosing a favorite child, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I tell all the recipes. I love them all equally. It's not true though, but I do say that. There's actually one of my favorite recipes in the book isn't even my own. It's for a basbousa cake, which is a Middle Eastern type of cake made from semolina flour and simple syrup and coconut. I got it from a friend of mine who is Middle Eastern. He donated the recipe for the book. It's the only recipe in there that isn't mine, and I think it's my favorite one in the book.
It's a good one to choose.
Yeah.
My final question before we'll turn it over to the audience to ask a few questions is, what advice do you have for those of us that are meat eaters at the moment looking to try and get more into a plant-based diet and maybe make that switch?
Yeah, I would say just explore foods that are out there. For me, aside from the ethical component of changing my diet, the thing that I really got the most out of it in terms of was just opening up my culinary experience. Before I adopted a plant-based diet, I was eating pretty much the same thing every day. Like, I was just a meat and potatoes kind of guy. I didn't really explore that much when it came to food. And so I would just say there's like a whole wide world of foods and ingredients out there that you might find you love. If you eat a beef burger, try an Impossible Burger, Beyond Burger, try veggie chicken. It might not taste exactly the same as chicken or as beef, but you might like it just as a different food product unto itself. Not to mention all the different things you can make out of like whole grains and nuts and produce.
Right on. Are there any questions out here from the audience? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm curious. So almost everybody has.
So the question was about having our own food forest in our yard, I've always had gardens. I love being able to just go out and pluck food from the garden and then come inside and eat it. And I know a lot of people are doing more of that. It's such an easy way to get basically free food and food that's fresh and healthy all the time. You know exactly what's gone into growing it. So yeah, I highly recommend it for everybody.
I think just to add on a little bit to that too, for a lot of us, we don't have the time to wait for a beet to grow and do the whole bit. But I find even if you have a tight little space, just growing fresh herbs on your patio is a great way to get started. You can throw them out there. You can start picking them immediately if you buy them kind of already grown. So it's a really easy way to start that going.
So thinking about natural farming and how animals like it.
Yeah, I mean, by and large, heritage animals don't really exist anymore. There are very few places that produce them. Almost exclusively, all the animals in our diet, certainly here in the U.S. and in North America and in Europe, come from are animals that have been bred specifically for the purpose of industrial agriculture. Whether in the future we're using animals in our diet, I'm not sure. I don't know if we use them as much as we are now, if we use them more than we are now, less, or not at all. But I think the point that I try to make in my book, and I think the one thing that pretty much everybody can agree on now, whether you're slaughtering a chicken in your backyard, whether you're eating meat 3 times a day, is we've got to eat less of this stuff if we want to bring about a better food supply. There's no way that our planet can sustain, just in the U.S. alone, raising 10 billion land animals. That doesn't even include fish. Raising 10 billion land animals a year under industrial conditions, locked in cages, locked in crates, just totally decimating the land. Because at the end of the day, the animal, even if it's a heritage bird or if it's an industrial produced animal, the same equation applies in terms of their conversion of plant matter into protein. And so, regardless of the source, we have to eat less of them. Heritage chicken is still eating grain, for the most part, that may have been grown on land that was once the Amazon rainforest. And so, yeah, I think it's all about less.
Right. I guess the question is also more.
Yeah, the question was, what happens to all the animals if we stop eating them? These animals aren't self-propagating. They're not out there breeding themselves under natural conditions. We're breeding them specifically for this purpose. So when people eat less and less and less animal products, we breed less and less of the animals. It's just supply and demand. Yeah, so the question was basically the energy costs of some of the plant-based convenience foods, like veggie burgers and veggie chicken and products like that. And I would say from an environmental standpoint, by all means, the closer we can get to a whole plant-based, locally sourced diet, the better off we are. Ultimately, though, even the processed foods, if they're plant-based, are better environmentally speaking because you cut out that middleman. So if you take a chicken nugget, for example, a real chicken nugget made of chicken, you have to grow all the crops, you have to process them still in grain mills, you have to transport them all over the world. Then you feed them to a chicken. You raise the chicken, slaughter the chicken, then you get protein. The process, so then you take like a vegetarian chicken nugget, for example, same process. You still have to grow the crops, you have to process them. You just turn it directly into the chicken nugget rather than going through that middleman first. It still has an environmental footprint. It's not by any means a zero footprint food, but it's much more efficient because you've cut out that middleman. But yeah, at the end of the day, the closer we can get to whole plant-based foods, the better.
Do you have a sense of the breeding process?
So it totally depends on the product, and there isn't good clear data on it. But we know, for example, that a gallon of milk, I think, costs upwards of 1,000 gallons of water, whereas a gallon of soy milk is more like maybe 100. So yeah, it depends on the product, depends on the brand and all of that, but much more resource efficient. I'm sure y'all are familiar with Google Trends. I hope everybody in here is, but it's really interesting. If you use Google Trends to see what people are searching for on the internet, if you look at the word vegetarian and the word vegan, the people searching for the term vegetarian is sharply declined, and people searching for the word vegan is sharply inclined. And there's a point where I think it's like around 2005 or something where people searching for the word vegan just like sharply go up while vegetarian goes sharply down. So I don't know if there's a branding problem. It seems like people are really interested in it, searching for it. We see it more on restaurant menus. But yeah, I do think that the term plant-based or plant-forward resonates a lot more with people for whatever reason. Yeah, so the question was about food allergies. I would say find the brands that work for you and stick to them. There are great gluten-free, for example, vegan convenience, plant-based convenience foods out there. The Beyond Meat burger is one example. It's a gluten-free burger that looks and tastes and bleeds just like beef, but is entirely plant-based and also gluten-free. The bun, that's another question. But yeah, a lot of the types of plant-based convenience foods do contain gluten in them. So if somebody, if you're allergic to that, that's definitely a concern. As far as other allergies go, I get a lot of questions about nut allergies. A lot of vegan or plant-based dairy products now are made from nuts, almond milk, cashew milk ice cream, sauces and cheeses and stuff like that. I would say, ironically, Google is your best friend on this. If you cook at home, if you Google, gluten-free, plant-based milk, you're going to get 1,000 recipes. And just because of the way your algorithm works, the ones toward the top are probably going to be the best ones. But yeah, additional allergies is definitely tough for eating out in general, even if you're not trying to eat a plant-based diet. Yeah, so the question was the environmental impact of chicken compared to beef. Beef has its own special set of problems. Cows are very gaseous animals, especially when they eat grass because of the way their digestion works. They emit a lot of methane, which is a major problem. Chickens emit less methane on the whole, but there's so much more of them. There's so much more chickens. Because they're smaller, we need more of them to sustain the food supply. So in the US, we have about 10 billion farmed animals. About 9.5 billion of those animals are chickens. Nearly all of them, more than 9 out of every 10 animals in the US is a chicken when it comes to our food supply. And so some of the biggest problems related to chicken farming are where do we put all these animals? That's when we put them into suburban neighborhoods like the one I talked about. Where does their waste go? It ends up in the land, it ends up in the waterways. We have so many chickens, we don't know what to do with them or their waste, and it's a major environmental catastrophe. Cows, also not great. A lot of methane contribution from them in terms of their digestion process. Seafood is another issue. We're pulling so many fish out of the ocean now that scientists say we're not going to have any left by 2048, which is not that far from now. Fish farming as well, huge environmental footprint. I would say, on the whole, moving more away from seafood, more away from poultry, more away from beef is probably the best bet.
All right. Well, I think now we can get to the...
Speaking of...
We have all these ingredients here. We might as well cook a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Thank you for being here.
Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Chef.
Hey, thank you.
So we're going to work through a vegan breakfast sandwich today, plant-based recipes, and we teach plant-based dishes in kitchen sink every day. So super excited about this one, and maybe we can just keep taking questions or just...
I'll answer this question before we get asked. Yes, we will get to taste this stuff. Everybody will get some. They're delicious. So what do we have? Let's talk us through some of the ingredients that we're going to be playing with here today.
So as far as the egg goes, we have garbanzo flour, chickpea flour, of course gluten-free, high in protein, nutritional yeast, which you guys spoke with earlier, some salt and pepper, and some turmeric. So it's pretty easy. Just mix these ingredients together.
And Matthew, you want to talk a little bit about inspiration or thought process behind this dish? I know we alluded to the environmental impact of this dish specifically in your presentation, but how did this come to be?
Yeah, I think chickpea flour is a great ingredient. Like Chef Dede said, it's just high in protein. It's easy to work with. You come out with a product that you can make egg-like products out of it. You can make I make potato pancakes using chickpea flour instead of eggs. Just really good for you and good product. And when you mix it with water and you let it sit for a little while, you'll see what happens. It turns into kind of a paste that you can scramble up a little bit like eggs. It is going to taste exactly like eggs and look like them, definitely not. But it's just a good product in its own right. I like to cook with ingredients like this that are just kind of readily available and simple. Where you think about making an egg patty for a breakfast sandwich, it's just chickpea flour, a little bit of salt, pepper, turmeric, a little bit of olive oil and water, and that's it. Very easy to make at home.
And minimizes the allergens that we talked about.
Yeah, and minimizes the allergens. It's a gluten-free product for all of you celiacs in the room.
Now, was this
The English muffin that we're going to eat it on is not so much gluten-free.
was this something that you were looking to try and fill a void for something that you had enjoyed prior to your lifestyle change, or?
Yeah, I think that when I think about plant-based foods that kind of look and feel and taste somewhat like, or in some cases a lot like their meat-based counterparts, I think back to my diet before I became, a vegan, before I ate a plant-based diet. I like the food. I like the taste of meat. I like the taste of eggs. For me, it had nothing to do with the taste, and so, I still want to eat those flavors, or as close to them as I can get. And this was a great example of just kind of a, something I always enjoyed eating when I was a kid. Something I always enjoyed eating before I adopted a plant-based diet and wanted to try to get closer to as a vegan.
Fantastic. And I want to talk a little bit about the sausage.
Yeah, so in the book, there's great vegan sausages on the market, but you also include one that you can make at home. So we decided to do that recipe as well. Definitely geared towards the more the European style with some sun-dried tomatoes and some basil and some garlic. But thinking about some other profiles that we could do, I mean, if you wanted to go more kind of along the Indian spices, you could throw in, some ginger, some masala. So I think you could really play around with this recipe to make whatever variety you wanted.
Yeah, it's a great thing about plant-based proteins, or at least kind of whole plant-based proteins like tofu, tempeh, seitan, which is what we're using today, is you can really play around with the flavor profile quite a lot. If you're making, sausage, pork sausage at home, you can obviously do the same thing, but with plant-based proteins, you just mix it right in there. When you're making seitan, it's vital wheat gluten water basically, and then whatever spices and herbs you want to use, just throw them right into the mix. And whether you want to do European or Italian flavoring or Indian flavoring, African spices, whatever it might be, come out with some really great products. So in the cookbook, the sausage patty that's used in this breakfast sandwich recipe, I just recommend using a store-bought brand, whatever brand you happen to like. This sausage recipe is taken from another recipe in the book, I think, right? The sun-dried tomato basil sausages.
Yep.
So Chef Dede here is kind of doing a little mashup for us.
A little creative freedom there, Chef.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's
Thank
right.
you. So the vital wheat gluten, some of the dried spices all go in one bowl, and then the paste and all the seasonings are going to go in here. A little bit of water, and I'm going to puree it with a hand blender, but you could easily do a food processor at home or Vitamix, and then we're going to mix these two things together. So pretty easy.
Yeah, and with seitan, for me in particular, I like to look at seitan as a completely blank canvas. I mean, it unto itself, it doesn't really have much of a flavor, but it kind of lends itself to this exact creative freedom that you can have to put whatever you'd like in it. There's recipes out there to make seitan chorizo, where it's the same flavors of Spanish chorizo that everybody loves in the meat eating world, but and some of the same texture, but in a completely vegan format. And I try to encourage people when they're cooking to have fun and experiment and not be afraid to make something that doesn't taste good one time and then come back and try it again. It's really, really important, and I think that's how you get to a place where you have something delicious like you've created here.
Yeah, and I think experimentation for me is key in the kitchen. And this was, the same way before I adopted a plant-based diet. Was I would experiment with foods all the time and come out with things that were not something I would want to eat ever. I'm sure anybody who cooks, has the same experience from time to time. Some recipes are just duds. And so I would say with plant-based food, just try different brands that are out there. Try different flavor profiles. Try different ways of preparing seitan and tofu and tempeh. Some are going to be duds, no doubt, because that always is the case. But you'll definitely find some, I'm sure, that you love, some that are winners, and that you stick with, all the time in your diet.
So in your book, you have some some pretty big celebrities in there that have given you a shout out.
I should have gotten you in there.
I don't know about that. I'm not even in that conversation. Why did you select the folks that you selected to be a part of the book, and how have they been advocates for your movement?
Yeah, there are a lot of great kind of notable people in the world who've been advocating for these types of changes in our food system, and so I tried to incorporate really anybody who had something to say about it. There are a lot of essays in the book. If you flip through, I think everybody in here probably should have gotten a copy. There are, a lot of essays in there from people like Jesse Eisenberg, the actor, from the heads of some of the major environmental groups. The president of NRDC and the Sierra Club have essays in there. From the food world, we've got folks like Chef Jose Andres has an essay in the book all about food issues and how they impact the world. And then in terms of endorsements, people like Wolfgang Puck and Emeril Lagasse and Alice Waters and Paul McCartney. And, I was just very fortunate to have a lot of people kind of support the project who have started making the shift either in part or in whole, or at least recognize that we've got to be eating more plant-based foods. Somebody like Wolfgang Puck is a great example, very meaty chef, German chef, very meat heavy, but believes that we ought to be eating more plant-based foods, and so, lent his voice to the project.
And on that front, I think we've seen a shift in recent years to chefs having a voice in these sort of political settings, environmental settings. How do you think the voice of somebody like Wolfgang Puck can really continue to drive this conversation in a way that we haven't had advocates in the past?
Yeah, well, I think that the major shift that's happened is that we see people from kind of all parts of the spectrum, from vegans to Wolfgang Puck, and pretty much everybody in between, who are now kind of coalescing around this idea of just eating more plant-based foods and less animal-based foods. Whether you go whole hog, no pun intended, whether you go whole hog toward a vegan diet.
Pun was intended.
Pun intended. It actually wasn't, but it should have been though. Whether you go fully in that direction or not, there's just so many people have kind of coalesced around this idea of eating more plants, less meat.
Fantastic. What's our next step here, Chef?
All right, one more thing to build out the sandwich. I know you talked a little bit about the vegan cheese, but we did a cashew aioli. So again, using nuts, for some great fats, and then we have lemon, garlic, a little bit of cayenne and paprika. So just another idea if you're building out sandwiches at home. So, and then little gem lettuces, a little bit of avocado. So super excited to share your recipe with everybody in the room. But yeah, we're gonna cook up the chickpea egg, and we're gonna sear off the sausages. So kind of a made for TV, made the breakfast sausage. This is what it looks like. Then we steam off the patty, and then you can brown it. So a couple of made for TV things happening here, but the recipe in the book is fully detailed.
Yeah, a little bit of TV magic and making it happen so quickly, right?
So.
And then seitan's a fun ingredient because you can play with the hydration level a little bit based on what desired outcome you're looking for. A little bit chewier, you obviously add a little bit less water. A little bit softer, you add a little bit more water. And so your hydration content will yield a different product based upon what you're looking for. Was there a question here?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be fun to do an entire cookbook of cooking failures? You could just call it cooking failures, like 100 of the worst recipes ever made. I don't know if it would sell that well, but yeah, so the question was a plant-based mac and cheese that was great at the time it was being eaten for the first time, but leftovers got a little bit grainy.
And
I would offer two recommendations. One, it could have been a product of not blending the cashews long enough or not soaking them long enough. So the longer you soak it, the creamier it's going to be when you blend it up. I usually soak them for at least 4 hours, maybe even 8, if I have the time. Okay, yeah, so yeah, soak them for a few hours in advance and then blend them up and really blend the heck out of them, and they'll stay pretty creamy. If it gets a little bit grainy for leftovers, I would say a quick fix would be mix a little bit more water and just give it a couple turns and then reheat it to kind of get back that creamy consistency.
Yes, sir.
The recipe that
Yeah, they're essentially one and the same. So by boiling it, you're putting it in a moist environment to continue to hydrate the seitan. And the same thing with the hydration level when you add your water in. Steaming it or boiling it for a longer period of time will yield a tougher or softer product depending on how you want to handle it. So they're essentially the same thing. It's just putting it in a moist environment to help it cook.
the same amount of time whether you steam it or boil it?
I would imagine so. Honestly, I've never steamed it before. So I don't know if it would be the same or if it would be less.
We also
perfectly honest.
did you can also do like a slow poach or a slow simmer with it too. So we have the steam oven here. But yeah.
You're gonna try and
Yeah.
flip
You're gonna
it?
try to give
Go
it a
for it,
flip?
chef.
I'm not gonna do it
No.
in front of all these people.
Yeah, I know.
I'm using the spatula.
Flip it.
Everybody back up.
We just talked about culinary failures. What a good environment. I think.
Oh, you got it. You can flip it. Yeah,
Boom.
Done.
Don't be
Done.
scared.
Done.
All right. So
We're getting close here. We're getting close.
are we gonna just cut this out?
Yeah, so a
it'll
couple
fit the
ways
size of our-
that we thought about the egg. You can use you can buy an egg ring, of course, and so it looks perfectly round like a scrambled egg might be. You can do it more in this omelet style. Laura talked about using a red bell pepper, and you could cut up slices, and then you can create your own little egg form to get it round too. So I think there's lots of solutions.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, basically cut a ring out of the red bell pepper and then pour the batter into the ring of pepper, and then the pepper cooks as the egg cooks.
Huh.
And you end up with something. You have to eat the pepper at the end. I guess you don't have to, but another great thing you can do if you don't own egg rings. I may be the only vegan on the planet that owns egg rings at home. But if you don't have them, what you can do is use the screw on top to a mason jar. Just the part that's hollow in the middle that screws on. Just grease that up, put it in your pan, pour it right in there, and you get a perfect circle.
Yes, sir.
In vegan cooking, I've learned little tricks to fool you into thinking you're eating something traditionally.
Yeah, I think so. The question was like, what are some ingredients that you can use to kind of trick yourself into thinking it's like the animal-based version? I honestly, I don't try to trick myself all that much. I try to eat foods that I think just taste good in their own right. Whether or not it's a perfect analog for a meat or animal-based version, I just wanted it to taste good. I think, but I know what you mean. Like black salt, it was the example you gave, has kind of a sulfuric taste to it that makes it taste a little bit more like eggs. Turmeric is a good example if you want, if you're making a tofu scramble or something like that, you want to just give it a little bit of a yellow tint. Turmeric's a great idea. Too much and it's going to taste like Indian food, but maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, there are all kinds of ingredients out there that can just give you little nods toward the animal-based version. All right, Chef Dede.
What do you think?
There we go.
Looks great.
Right on. All right, well, I think that's what we've got for you today, and we have some sandwiches here for everybody to taste. I'd like to thank Matthew again for being here and sharing your story and sharing your book with all of us here today.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you. I can't wait to try your spin on it.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be passing out
Cool.
sandwiches for everybody.
Fantastic. And thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate having you here. Thanks so much.